Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Today is Season 6, Episode 13, and we are looking at the last positional group that we have, and that's interior defensive line. Steelers shouldn't be in the market for interior defensive line. They kind of have their starters. They're kind of good in that regard. You could make an argument that for years going forward, they're going to need someone because Tyson Alualu is only on a short deal, and you might want to replace a guy like Isaiah Buggs, maybe if you consider him interior, but Isaiah Buggs is also kind of defensive end. You could make an argument. I would personally say interior defensive line is probably the position that the Steelers need the least out of every other position, including possibly specialist, because you could make an argument for a long snapper and a better punter if you really felt like it. But yeah, so starting with the interior defensive line, honestly, I don't know what it was. I felt like I didn't have much to say about these guys. Like, I was watching their tape and I don't know what it was, but I really felt like there wasn't much to talk about. I don't know if it's just the defensive line position or the defensive tackle position, but, like, I feel like I had less to say. I feel like in previous years I've had way more to say about defensive tackles, but this is probably going to be a quick episode because I only have 3 prospects because I didn't value this position, and I didn't have much to say. So hopping right into it, I started with Jonathan Marshall from Arkansas. He's 6'3" and 310 pounds. He was in my first mock draft, which means almost everyone besides my edge rusher from Appalachian State that I mocked in my original mock draft, I have done and looked at, and I think that was good. I think that's cool. Marshall was an all-around athlete coming out of high school in Texas as an edge rusher, basketball player, and shot put participant. He was a top 100 player in his recruiting class and had an interesting commitment process where he was between Oklahoma State and TCU and had committed to TCU before decommitting and pledging to Oklahoma State. Then out of nowhere, Arkansas came along and he settled on the Razorbacks. For sure that time. He really didn't get to see much playing time, though. As a redshirt freshman, he played in 12 games, got 6 tackles. Then in the next season, played in 11 games, got 14 tackles. And in 2019, he played in 13 games, got 17 tackles, with 4.5 being for a loss. In 2020, he was finally able to become a starter and started all 10 games, putting up 35 tackles, 6.5 for a loss, a sack, and a forced fumble. So with no more years of eligibility, he declared for the draft. So what's good about him is he's nearly a perfect athlete for a defensive tackle, ranking second out of 1,307 defensive tackles to come out with a 9.99 relative athletic score. If you guys are unfamiliar with relative athletic score, it takes into account all the combine stuff and height and weight, and then kind of gives them a score. And again, I shout them out all the time. At MathBomb on Twitter puts them into nice little pictures for everyone to see and ranks them and tells you, so check them out on Twitter. That's where I get my stats from on the relative athletic score. But yeah, he's a rare athlete for a defensive tackle. He got a 36 on the bench, and he did a 20-yard split in 2.7 seconds, which is ridiculous for a guy at 310 pounds. That is some really impressive hip flexibility and really impressive speed for a guy at his weight, and it shouldn't be like that. That shouldn't exist. That shouldn't be able to happen. Not the 36 on the bench press. 36 on the bench press, that's really good, and I really like that for a defensive tackle. But like, that's not super incredible. The 2.7 on the 20-yard split, that is super incredible. He also ran a 4.88 40-yard dash. Again, a guy at 310 pounds moving faster than a 5-second 40-yard dash is really good. There could be some discrepancy with the pro day, but honestly, I even being able to put up close to that at his height, at his weight is really good. Then he flashed as a bull rusher when he drove his feet. He didn't always drive his feet. It's kind of actually a negative. But when he did, he flashed as a bull rusher. He's able to push guys back. I mean, you kind of expect that from a guy with that much speed and that much power. You should be able to combine both to absolutely drive people back. So I liked what he flashed in that regard. And then he was a team captain in 2020. He was praised for how much of a leader he was, and that's always a good thing to have guys that are voted team captains or leaders in the locker room. You need that. You need more leaders. So going to the negative side of things, he has a weak base, and as I said, he typically stops moving his feet. He has the arm strength for sure. I mean, you can't deny that. The bench press showed that, but I felt like he needed a stronger base to match it. So I felt like it was inconsistent. Like I guess all his strength is in the upper body. He should try and put on some more strength in the lower body because it will help him with driving his legs. I think for a defensive tackle it would be really helpful. Then he could be faster off the snap. I felt like his snap to attack speed wasn't that great. I won't say it's the worst in the world. It wasn't like, oh wow, this guy is terrible. He can't time the snap at all. But it was just a little bit labored, I'd say. Then he really struggled to find the ball. I mean, you could tell he kind of is like an athlete playing out there. He doesn't really have the football IQ, in my opinion. I felt like he just really struggled to actually get to the ball, find where it was. He was just kind of pushing. He was just kind of going against his guy, just kind of doing athlete stuff. That's like the best way to describe it. Then he's not a very good gap filler. That being said, I mean, again, he doesn't really have the football IQ. I felt like I feel like he's going to need to do a lot more tape study and stuff to be able to succeed at the NFL level. But he wasn't good at filling gaps because he just couldn't find the ball. He didn't know what gaps to fill. He needed to do a better job of securing tackles. A lot of guys slipped his tackles off their ankles, so he needs to do a better job in that regard. And then he wasn't a good block shedder. I was kind of surprised by that. I thought that with his arm strength, he'd be able to whip guys' arms down and kind of get off, but he wasn't really able to get off. It might not be that he's a bad block shedder. This might just relate back to him being, not good at finding the ball and just not knowing when he had to shed the block. So, I mean, you could possibly take it that way. I'm not really sure. From the tape I saw, it just didn't really look like he was good at shedding the blocks. Then I felt like he wore down towards the end of games. I mean, he's a big dude. You kind of expect their endurance to not be as good as other guys, like that are smaller, but he did look a little bit worn down towards the end of games. So the selling point on Marshall is going to be his athleticism. But my problem was I felt like it didn't even translate well on tape. I didn't see amazing play strength or play speed from the DT position. I saw adequateness. Like I thought he did fine. Like I didn't have a problem with his strength. I didn't have a problem with his speed, but I didn't see that amazing pro day strength and speed that he put up there. And I mean, there's several reasons I could go into that. I'm not sure. I'm not going to really theorize why it didn't really look as good on tape, but it's just you know what, I will theorize. It's mostly because while he has strong arms, his base still isn't very strong. He doesn't get the push he should because of it. And I think that really messes with a lot of his strength because he has the strong punch, from his arms, but like he's not able to drive with his feet because he's not actively using his feet and he doesn't have that strong of a base. So I personally view it that way. Regardless, he's going to be considered one of the top prospects to develop from the defensive tackle position, especially in a very, 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 did I say very, very weak defensive tackle class. He's going to be considered one of the top prospects to develop, and I give him a 7th round grade. I just didn't see many good things or anything remarkable, but if you coach him up, the ceiling for a guy with his athleticism that he showed at his pro day is tremendous. Since his pro day, he's been mostly mocked in round 6 because of it, but he was considered like an undrafted free agent before that, so I give him the 7th round grade. I give him the in-between. I think that he's worth drafting before his athleticism alone. So, to develop my opinion, I watched his highlights. I watched the Arkansas defense versus Auburn offense. I watched the Arkansas defense versus Ole Miss in 2020. I watched Arkansas defense versus Mississippi State offense in 2020. So that brings me to my last prospect, and please forgive me my second prospect. Please forgive me in advance if I mess up his name. I tried practicing it, and I'm probably still going to be pronouncing it wrong, and I really apologize for that. And my second prospect is Marlon Tuipulo Ii. Tuipulo Ii. I think that's how you say it. Tuipulo Ii. I hope I said that right. He is from USC. He is a 6'2" and 300-pound defensive tackle. As a high school recruit in Oregon, Marlon came out as a 4-star player, just barely outside the top 100 ranking, and considered the 8th best defensive lineman. He received offers from Oregon, Notre Dame, and Michigan before choosing to leave his home and head for Southern Cali. He was able to see immediate playing time as a freshman. However, a sprained knee and back would keep him from playing all too much after starting one of the 3 games he played in, getting 2 tackles. In his next season, he was able to start 10 to 12 games and got 33 stops with 5.5 for loss and 4.5 sacks. 2019, he broke out, though, starting all 12 games and putting up 46 tackles with 6 for a loss, 2 sacks, and 3 pass breakups. In 2020, he was a first-team All-Pac-12 pick for his 23 tackles, 3.5 for a loss, and 2 sacks through 6 starts. So what's good about him is he's another guy that's pretty strong. He had above 30 on the bench press as well, so he is really strong in the arms. And then he keeps active hands. He's a hand fighter that is able to keep moving around, and keep driving his feet while using his hands, and I like that. I think a hand fighter is important as a defensive tackle. It helps you get around guys, and the driving the feet helps as well. It helps him get a better push, cause pressure some more, even if he can't necessarily hit the quarterback. Causing pressure from driving a guy back with his driving feet is good. Then I liked his snap to attack speed. I thought that he was pretty fast off the snap every single time. Gave him a little bit of that advantage, So I liked that. Then he chased guys down the field. He was a guy that had good enough play speed, and he was a high effort player. That he was a guy that would chase down guys on the other side of the field, even from the defensive tackle position. Like, he wouldn't give up. He's high motor, and I appreciate that. I like a high motor guy. And then I didn't really see it much on tape, but he seemed like a serviceable tackler. I that's kind of more of a guess. I'll be honest with you. It's like I really didn't see that many attempts in the games I played. I mean, you look at his 2020 stats, he only had 23 tackles, and I was only able to watch, 3 games from 2020? So, I felt like I really didn't see that much. I feel like I didn't have a great read on how he was. He seemed alright, that's what I'm going to say. Like, he seemed serviceable, but I will put it out there that I'm not completely sure. So go to the negative things. He could use a stronger punch. For a guy that has above a 30 bench press, I was a little bit disappointed with his punch into contact. So then most people can't, but he doesn't have the tool set to handle double team blocks. He really struggled on double team blocks to get a drive going. He just kind of got stood up there and sometimes pushed back, honestly. But so he won't be able to start double team blocks. Then I felt like he has below average block shed abilities. Like, I felt like he really struggled to get off blocks and make the tackles, and that's part of the reason why I didn't get to see him make many tackles. I felt like he wasn't getting off many blocks. Then he could use better balance. I felt like he ended up on the floor quite a few times, and he just needed better balance. Like, there was a play where he just kind of got thrown to the side and pushed to the ground just because he got twisted. So I think overall he could use better balance. And with Marlon, to not beat around the bush, I give him a 5th round grade. His tape really didn't show anything overly impressive, but I felt like he was doing quite a few things well where he could be a 5th rounder. However, it seems like most people have him as a 4th rounder, and some even have him going as high as a 3rd. I think both of those are a bit of a stretch, as he is a late 5th round grade for me, but to each their own. To develop my opinion on him, I watched his highlights. I watched first UCLA in 2020. I watched the USC defense versus Oregon in 2020. I watched the USC defense versus Washington State in 2020, and that was all. That brings me to my last prospect, and that's Marvin Wilson from FSU. He is 6'4" and 303 pounds. He was one of the biggest deals coming out of high school, regarded as the best defensive tackle prospect and the best player in general coming out of the state of Texas, which that is a huge deal. Texas is a breeding ground for football players, so to be the number 1 player in Texas is pretty big. He rated as the 6th best player in the entire nation. That's how good he was considered, ahead of guys like Chase Young and Jeff Okudah, who were 7th and 8th on the list. And you know how they are. They got drafted 2 and 3? Yeah, because Joe Burrow went 1. They went 2 and 3 last year. So they were big deals. So, as you'd expect, he got offers from everywhere, including LSU, Oklahoma, Ohio State, but chose FSU, citing 2 things. And I found this hilarious, and that's why I'm mentioning. 1, being able to use custom Jordan brand sneakers, and then 2, FSU's honey fried chicken. He said he had the honey fried chicken, and then that's when he made his decision to go to FSU. He said it sounded gross, and then he had it, and he's like, he ate the entire plate. That is one of the most hilarious backstories I found on a prospect. I really, really love that. But as a freshman, he was a reserve player, playing in 12 games and amassing 7 tackles. The next season, he cracked the starting lineup, starting 5 of the 12 games he played in to go on and earn honorable mention All-ACC recognition for his 42 tackles, 4.5 tackles for a loss, and 3.5 sacks. He was a first-team All-ACC player the following season after putting up 44 tackles, 8.5 tackles for a loss, 4 pass breakups, and a team-leading 5 sacks through only 9 starts. He would have had an even better season, but he suffered a hand injury that knocked him out for the rest of the year. As a senior, the stats came down, but he was still voted a first-team All-Conference player after starting 5 of 6 games and putting up 17 tackles and 2 for a loss, and blocked 3 kicks, tying for the FBS lead, all while dealing with a lower body injury. Following his senior season, he declared for the draft. So what's good about him is he gets his hands up into passing lanes. I mean, the 4 pass breakups in 2019 was very, very impressive. I mean, you saw him do it against kicks too. He is really good. And I want to point it out, it's a negative, but like he had a really bad vertical at his pro day, like bottom 2 percentile of all defensive tackles ever for his vertical. But I think that was just a mistake at his pro day. I mean, he's a guy that's getting his hands up and into passing lanes. You don't block 3 kicks without being good at getting your hands up into the air. You know what I'm saying? And I felt like his pass breakups were good too. So I was very happy with him getting his hands into passing lanes. Again, even the stats don't show it, but he only got 4 pass breakups, but that doesn't count for all the passes he made tougher because he had his hand up and the quarterback had to throw around it. He is a guy that does it more often than not when he can't get there. Then he has great block shedding abilities. I found that he was able to get off blocks whenever he wanted to for the most part. It was pretty good in that regard. And then he's great at finding the ball. He'd get off blocks and then he'd be able to find the ball. He knew where he was going. Like, he had that experience. Then he's very active with his hands. He uses them as a hand fighter, and he was a very good hand fighter. Then he has a stronger base than my other 2 prospects. Not the best positive in the world, because I felt like the base of my other 2 prospects wasn't very good, but I did want to point that out, that he was stronger in that regard. And then he's an experienced tackler. He dives for feet, even if he thinks he won't be able to catch up and make a proper tackle, and I like that. I felt like there wasn't always a time where he could make a proper tackle, because he just wasn't fast enough. But, I mean, him diving for the feet, just trying to slow a guy down, I appreciated that. I appreciated him putting in that effort. Then he keeps his feet moving. He keeps them driving, and that's always a good thing. And then I want to point out that he has some positional versatility. I mean, he's a big guy. He's 6'4" and 303 pounds. But he lined up as defensive end in some sets. So, I mean, he could kind of move over the defensive line. And that's kind of how the Steelers play their defensive linemen. I mean, Cameron Hayward is, I think, technically a defensive tackle, but, like, I consider Cameron Hayward a defensive end. But, I mean, like, they move all over the line, and that's just how it is. Like, that's how the Steelers use their defensive linemen. So, that versatility in college could be useful for the Steelers going forward. Going to the negative things, he has below average speed. I felt like he was really slow. His pro day didn't show that. His pro day said he was average, but I'll say that he has below average play speed, I guess. But also the pro day could obviously be a little bit off. But we'll say that the play speed isn't good. And I think a reason for that is he's slow off the snap. He was the worst at that, getting off, timing it, and just overall snap to attack speed. So that was a concern when he was already kind of slower at running. Then he could use more strength with a below average showing on the bench press, and then his base isn't overly impressive, honestly. At best I feel like his base was adequate, and just in comparison to my other 2 prospects it was good, but he could use more strength there. But his bench press also wasn't very good. He needs to build strength in general, and then he could get better. And then the effort is there, but he needs to take better angles to the ball when it's bounced outside. Like, I liked that he did put in the effort to try and chase down guys like Marlon, but he's just not the same because he just doesn't have the speed and he didn't have angles, so he needs to take better angles with the speed he has. I feel like that was how I felt about him. So, overall, almost a year ago, Wilson was being talked about as a potential first-round pick in the 2021 draft, but after his 2020 season, where he didn't look as strong as he did in 2018 and 2019, he fell down draft boards. There doesn't really seem to be a consensus on where he will go, but round 4 seems to be very popular. I personally give him a late round 3 to early round 4 grade. He didn't look as good on his 2020 tape, and it's kind of a combination of things, I guess. He could have been a little out of shape, because the strength looked like it came down compared to previous years, but he was also playing with a lower body injury. So that's also something to consider. I mean, how much did that play into it? He could have been out of shape, but regardless, what I think is, I think in 2019 and 2019, the 2018 and 2019, I apologize, player is still in there. I think he could provide special teams abilities on kicks with how well he did at blocking kicks on college. So again, I give him a late third round grade because I think that the injury really hampered him, and he would have been on track for a really good season regardless. So to develop my opinion on him, I watched versus Miami in 2018, I watched versus Louisville in 2019, I watched his tape versus Georgia Tech in 2020, and I watched versus Miami in 2020. So getting to ranking my prospects, number 1, I have Jonathan Marshall. He is first because he is supposed to go the latest, and that is my real reasoning. Steelers shouldn't be players for non-edge defensive linemen, but if they are, it should be a late-round guy with developmental upside, like Marshall. Still, with the Steelers' other needs, I mean, they should avoid defensive tackle in this class, but I still give Jonathan Marshall first, because, I mean, he's got the developmental ability, and he's probably going the latest. Number 2, I have Marvin Wilson. He's a bit slower, but I liked what he showed in his earlier tape. He was a monster, and I saw why he had, at one point, had first-round projections. Obviously, a high pedigree guy coming out of high school, too. So, however, at a third or even fourth round pick, that's a lot to pay when you don't need it, so he came in second. And obviously, that's going to leave Marlon Tuipulo Ii to last. And that's because I just didn't like his tape, and he's a guy that's considered the same value as Wilson. But I do not see that at all. Wilson looks so much better on tape, even in 2020, and it's what's considered a down year while he was playing through injury. Like I said, I gave Marlon a 5th-round grade, a late 5th-round grade at that, so he comes in last year based on where others think he's going. If he comes in at late 5th, I think he's still last, because I think I'd still prefer Marvin Wilson, because he's just that much better, and the value is not there at all. But that should wrap up today's episode. You guys have been listening to Season 6, Episode 13 of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Hopefully we come back with one more. I'm trying to get a mock draft out for the Steelers. I don't think I'm going to do the NFL this year because it's just I don't really have it's so tough this year. It really is, with guys opting out and stuff like that. So I'm not going to do an NFL one, but I am going to do a Steelers mock draft on the PFF simulator and knock that out. I think I'm going to look at 3 more prospects. Maybe only 2, maybe 3, maybe 4. We're going to see. We're going to see how much I can knock out because I'm recording this on Tuesday. Obviously, the draft is Thursday, and I can't record at all Thursday morning. So it's up to tomorrow to get that all knocked out. So I'm going to try my best to get some more prospects. But everybody, I hope you've been enjoying listening. If you want to check us out on social media, look at the description below. And everybody, go Steelers.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.